Hey everybody, it's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Corsair Virtuoso Max, which admittedly was one of the more anticipated launches for me for the entire year for a few reasons. Now, a lot of people kind of associate Corsair with having excellent mic quality, and it's more common on the HS80 and up. So like the Virtuoso lineup that preceded this, the HS80, HS80 Max, etc. So I was excited about a new headset with an excellent mic because there's been a lot of hits and misses with that lately. But when the Virtuoso Pro came out, which was an open back graphene-based gaming headset several months ago, I was thinking surely their new flagship will use graphene drivers as well, but then we're going to get all the other benefits such as wireless, Bluetooth, etc. because it has big shoes to fill with the Virtuoso RGB XT. The Virtuoso Max was sent to me for review by Corsair in advance, which is why I could release this at the time of the official launch, but it won't affect what I say about it. As you will soon see, there's some things that, frankly, I'm not too crazy about. So let's start with the basics. At $330, this is more expensive than the Virtuoso RGB XT that this replaced, and that's to be expected, I guess, with inflation and all that, but obviously with a higher price, I would expect the same or more features in addition to various improvements. Now, it's available in black or silver, and the silver is kind of a nice silver. It's not really bright. It has some depth to it. And admittedly, I didn't even know there was an Xbox version coming. That wasn't in the press release at all. And the only reason why I found out is because Best Buy leaked this headset early because they delayed the release date of this, and Best Buy is kind of an autopilot. So I did purchase an a Virtuoso Max from Best Buy. It will show up the same day as this review. So I will do the best I can for testing the Xbox edition, and I will update in a pinned comment in the video below to help kind of explain, I guess, if there are any differences there or if I ran into any issues. This review is going to be focused on the PS and PC version, which is this guy here. As far as what's included in the box, again, some similarities to the RGB XT. So I brought out my old one because frankly, I used this for a long time, especially for work during the day because the microphone was so good. So as far as what's included on the new one, the Max, you get a new hard case, which is to me a very welcome addition over the pouch. This was a nice pouch. It's quilted, it looks good, and it likes to hold lint. But I liked it. I thought this design was great and it made it easy to travel. This is even better because you're actually going to get real protection out of it. And when you open it up, it's actually not just like a basic pouch. There's a little inlay in here to help keep everything organized. And this helps keep your headset lasting longer because there's no more stress of it moving around. It kind of firmly seats into place. You tuck the charge cable in behind and then kind of rest everything on top. As far as other accessories that are included, you still get a long USB A to C braided cable and then a large USB A transmitter. Now, I don't mind if the transmitters are a little bit larger as long as they perform well. It's very much the same looking as the RGB XT that this replaced, but they do perform differently. With a lot of new headsets switching to USB-C, it would have been nice to have this switch to a C and then come with the A adapter, but it's all one piece. Now here's where some of the changes are. I want to talk about how this compares to the RGB XT first. Now you still get a detachable mic, which is awesome. They did switch to a fabric or like cloth pad as opposed to the old leatherette pads, and the chassis is different as well. Even if the general design can look similar to an extent, it's a completely different feeling and looking chassis. I mentioned that it has a USB A to C cable just like the older RGB XT, but that USB A to C cable does not work as a wired headset anymore. The older Corsair Virtuoso RGB worked as a USB A to C headset. So if you didn't want to use the wireless, you could benefit that and run it at a higher sample rate, but that feature is gone. Another thing they got rid of is the 3.5 millimeter input, which was actually a big selling point with me on this one, because the old one could work with 3 sources simultaneously. It's one of the only headsets out there where you could have a wireless connection to your PC, Bluetooth to your phone, and then an analog connection all at once to a third device. And this was really helpful for streamers or people who are doing a mix of console live streaming and want to connect to a mixer or whatever else. The flexibility there was excellent. This one, it dropped that, so you lose 2 big connectivity features, in my opinion. However, they did add a few things as well that this doesn't have. One big improvement over the RGB XT is the wireless range. So I do something called the toilet test, and that's something the RGB XT struggled at. If you got more than 20 feet away from the transmitter, it tends to drop out quite a bit. It was unstable at best at any remote distance. So depending on your room or home layout, it wasn't the best even though it was wireless. Significant improvements on the Virtuoso Max, so that alone is a huge thing to consider. I could go over 50 feet reliably, and I could even get up to 60 plus feet before it started cutting out. Also included is a hardware-based Dolby Atmos license, so there's no like code to plug in, so anything this is plugged into, if it's on the PC side, it'll automatically allow you to run Dolby Atmos, which does give you the option to do EQ, but we're going to get into all the sound quality changes later. Now, even though we lost the USB wired connection and the 3.5mm, we do still have the simultaneous Bluetooth, which is huge, and the controls change as well. I really like these new controls. It's very premium, and the outer cup is the volume wheel, and it's butter smooth. It feels so good and easy to adjust, and when you're wearing it, the left cup is your master volume for your PC, and that does work on PlayStation as well, but it's not controlling the PlayStation volume. So if you are using this on PS5, plug in the dongle on PS5, set your volume to max, and then use the headset wheel to adjust. And if it's on, when you're pushing it up from the back side, it's volume up. Pulling it down will decrease it. You can access it for pretty much around the entire cup, which is nice. Now the right wheel, this is where there's some gray area. So we're going to get into features and all that on PC, but there's no game to chat control on the headset. There's no game to chat support at all, which I'm not happy about, but the right wheel does control Bluetooth volume. As far as the rest of the controls go, you have like a slide toggle power switch. If it's up, it's completely off. If it's down, you are now in wireless mode, and if you hold it down for a couple seconds, it'll put it in Bluetooth pairing mode. Once it's paired again, it will connect to both simultaneously. You can listen to both, and it doesn't do any audio ducking, so if Bluetooth is streaming, it's not reducing the volume on the PC side. As mentioned, you have a a detachable microphone. I said USB because of what it looks like. It's using USB-C port. So once that's on, your mic switch is right here to mute it, and it does light up. So right now it's off because of what I just did, but when the mic is plugged in, if it's connected to PC and you tap this, it'll have a little red ring on it. As far as the right side controls are, this button right here serves as two things. If you press and hold, you are toggling the active noise cancellation mode, which is great. Now you hear two different sound effects, like a whoosh sound, and if it whooshes with an upward tone, then the ANC is on. If it whooshes down, then it goes into transparency mode, and if you hear this weird like double tone, it's turning all active noise cancellation off. So if you're not familiar with transparency mode, it basically uses the mics built into the headset to replay the audio from outside of the ear cups. This is a closed back, so it's designed to block out exterior noise, making it harder to hear your environment. If you want to hear that, you can put it in transparency mode, and it pulls all of that in. It does increase your noise floor a little bit because you have all this extra noise being pumped in. So for competitive play, either turn active noise cancellation off entirely or leave it on, because I am pleased to say, at least on this model, it didn't affect sound quality whether I had ANC on or off. So the only thing it does do is when ANC is on, there is a little bit of a noise floor that's added. If that noise floor is quieter than PC fans or your HVAC, then leave ANC on. If the noise floor is louder because your room is dead quiet, then leave it off. Now below the action button, you also get this little like toggle Bluetooth thing that goes up and down for track and press it in for play pause. I thought this would be dedicated to Bluetooth when I was connected to it, so if I'm playing music from my phone, I could adjust the track because this side is what volume wheel is adjusting Bluetooth. When it's connected to PC, this was actually sending commands to my PC instead, so it started kicking off that media player and changing tracks. It will work if you're not using it as a wireless headset to do Bluetooth controls, and you can press it in to answer phone calls as well. But it's interesting that the default behavior favors the PC side. Now getting into comfort, there are huge changes here. Some good, some bad. When you compare it to the older RGB XT, very different ear cups. They went with cloth, which makes that scratchy sound. But I do love that they're switching the materials because leatherette degrades over time, and frankly it just wears out and it'll start to flake. This was a really high quality material that they used on the older one, but some models they tend to degrade quicker than others. So a lot of it depends on your skin and climate for where you're playing. Either way, this is much more breathable. Now one of the issues I had with the older RGB XT is how shallow the ear cups are. I'm at like 16 millimeters if I'm trying to oversell it here. And when you wear that, the issue with the older one, the clamp force was non-existent. I mean, I could shake my head and it moves. If I look up, it'll fall off my head. So it's not good for smaller heads at all. And because the ear cups are very shallow, with a light clamp force, your ear is resting right against the non-padded baffle. So the other downside of this is I never had a full seal I pretty much had to use Wicked cushions on this because it was the only way to get somewhat of a contact around my ear in case I was actually trying to hear some bass. It sounds pretty terrible without a seal, so this headset was very specific to head shape for if people enjoyed it or not. I'm pleased to say that clamp force is greatly increased on the new Virtuoso Max. Almost too much because the pads, which I'll get into in a moment, but it's completely secure. It's not a vice-like grip like, you know, the Turtle Beach Stealth 700 Gen 2, for example, but it is on the stronger side, and clamp force of this is actually higher than some other models that are known to have a decent clamp already. Now the pads on this are super deceiving because you look at it from the side view or on the back and look how thick those monsters look. I mean, that's a very easy way to get excited about this from certain photos. It is so misleading because one, I'm going to start with the depth and show you some things. So I have a little bit of a lip on this ruler, but I picked this, I didn't scratch the pads. Realistically, if you add that lip, I'm at about like 22, 23 millimeters of depth on the back and right about 21 millimeters of depth on the front. As far as the opening goes, you have, I mean, they're round for the most part, so it's a pretty good opening, almost 60 millimeters of height, and we're pushing about 58 millimeters of width. Now check this out. These pivot or rotate off, just like the older one, but look at how much of the pad, if you see this giant lip here, this half of the padding is cosmetic. Like this cloth, the padding goes all the way to there. That's it. It's like almost non-existent on the front, and you immediately hit this hard plastic. Now in practice on your ear, you don't feel it terribly so, but it is very obvious that you have like no cushion there. It's pretty hard, and I'm just gonna warn you now, if you wear glasses, this is one of the least comfortable headsets in this price range I've used for glasses because of that very little forgiveness on the pad. This is probably, if you're ever looking for aftermarket pads, there's no aftermarket pad for this yet, it just came out. If Wicked Cushions or Dakoni or someone else comes out with a pad leader that is an upgrade to this, that makes it thicker, yes, the clamp force would technically increase, but the reason why this feels as strong as it does is because the padding is very poor. So I strongly recommend upgrading to a pad on this, and then I'll try to do my best to cover that down the road so you can know how it impacts sound quality. So comfort is a mixed bag. I'm super happy about the stronger clamp force. It feels much more secure on my head, and I get much more consistent sound quality delivery because of that. But on the comfort side, both of these are still a miss when you compare it to many other headsets in this price range. It's also slightly heavier than the RGB XT, not by much, only about 30 grams, but it still feels really well built. I mean, this is easily one of the most premium headsets I've been holding on to. There's been some big wins lately. The Alienware headset that came out recently feels amazing in hand. The finish is a little bit more sensitive to actual wear and tear and abuse, at least because I've been using it for a while. This feels like it's going to hold up the test of time, but anytime you have this kind of reflective coating, if you have like a scratch, if you have a metal ruler and you accidentally nick it, chances are it's going to show that over time. Overall, all the button feels, the adjustments, the telescoping yoke, everything feels great. The only thing I want to point out is I have like no signs of actual metal here. This is all plastic, which at $330, it still seems well made, a little creaky, but overall, I think this is still going to hold up well. I'm just surprised to not see as much use of metal. Maybe they were concerned with weight, but I did want to point that out. Now, this actually has RGB as well, and I love how tasteful it is. It's very subtle, and they use RGB for status, as you can see, because I'm disconnected at the moment, and that's what the microphone mute light looks like when it is on. Now, you can customize this. If you're running IQ, you get a lot more effects you can pick from. But if you're using it on memory mode, which is basically what happens when you're connected to a PlayStation, you can basically pick through solid colors and save that to the headset itself. So if you want it to be blue or pink, you can easily do that or turn it off. And what would a headset review be without a microphone test? And this is what the Virtuoso Max microphone sounds like. I don't have to speak too loud in this headset. This headset does not have a massive dynamic range. So if you tend to yell and scream a lot, you really want to cut back on the sensitivity of the mic. Right now I'm at 65% in Windows, and you also want to make sure that you position it correctly. I still think the microphone sounds good. I don't think there's any real issues with it. It's not like a game-changing improvement or a class-leading mic, because things like the Astro and the BlackShark sound excellent in my opinion, which you'll soon hear, but this is still a worthy option in today's market. Now, one thing that is new with the Virtuoso Max is noise suppression. They did a great job at rejecting background noise. It will sound processed if you talk while there's heavy background noise, but I wanted to show you how effective this is. So this is a PC Duster fan. I'm going to turn it on, and you're going to hear it through the shotgun mic first.
As you can see, it cuts back all the sound, but the processing is quite heavy. So it is nice that it filters it out. There's no way to turn off the noise filtering, but at least you can hear the difference. Now, one thing I do get asked about a lot is microphone side tone performance, and I'm just going to be blunt. If side tone is super important for you, then this is probably not your headset. It's probably one of the worst performing side tones I've ever heard, to a point where it's almost unusable when it's on. So when you first enable side tone, which you can do by pressing and holding the mute button, you're barely audible. You get like little traces and peaks of a really robotic sounding version of yourself, but it's very faint. So you go into Corsair IQ and you boost the side tone volume to max, which is located in the equalizer section. Once you've boosted side tone all the way up, you hear a constant humming and buzzing robotic sound. Now, if you can get past that sound, the next thing you have to deal with is how robotic and just slightly delayed you sound through the headset. This amount of noise and feedback and mismatch of what's actually happening, to me, it makes it too much of a distraction. And frankly, I couldn't play with it on at all. Now, for quality assurance and comparison purposes, this is what the older Virtuoso RGB XT microphone sounds like in comparison to the Virtuoso Max. Now, on the note of high quality microphones, here's the Razer BlackShark V2 Pro 2023 edition. This microphone is incredible. I still think it's one of the best wireless mics you can get, especially for the money, because this is only $200. And I wanted to compare it to the new Virtuoso Max. And then to me, the only headset that's really rivaled the BlackShark V2 Pro in terms of microphone sound quality is the Astro A50X and now released Astro A50 Gen 5, which is $300 and has the exact same mic system. The only difference is it lacks HDMI switching. So this is right in the same price range as the Virtuoso Max, and to me, this kind of represents the pinnacle of how good microphones can be in a wireless headset. And this is what my voice sounds like on the Odyssey Maxwell, which sounds okay. It doesn't sound as clear, but this also has a really strong noise suppression system. It's probably one of the better sounding mics that has a very aggressive noise suppression. So if you are concerned with a noisy environment and the Corsair Virtuoso Max isn't necessarily what you're looking for, this is another option to consider.
All right, now it's time to talk about sound quality from an objective standpoint first, which uses measurements and takes my opinion out of it, and then I will explain this very thoroughly in detail later for how I hear it, how it impacted my game performance, music listening, and all of that. And if you look at the measurements, this is a pretty alarming sound profile. There's a heavy bass lift followed by a massive scoop in the mid-range. So if you are using this for music, there's a massive suck out in the mid-range, followed by a strong peak right about, I think it's 1300 hertz or so if we were to look at the inspector here, right about 1300 hertz, a bit of a dip, another rise again, and then the pinna region, this isn't too bad. This is a common thing at 4K to kind of be scooped a little bit. It has a more relaxing sound, and headsets like the SteelSeries Nova Pro do the same thing. I don't mind that so much, and then the only real issue I had is at 6000 hertz or 6200 hertz. There is a little bit of a peak making it somewhat sharp. Now, one of the issues I have with my specific unit is channel matching, and I will be checking this against my Xbox edition that I ordered to see how the measurements compare, but my unit had a pretty big driver mismatch. In FPS gaming and where imaging is critically important, surprisingly, this didn't make a massive difference on my ability to pinpoint footsteps. I will talk about gaming performance, but I didn't want to hide the fact that I had a slight channel imbalance. I had more bass on the, I think it was the right driver, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see here. The left driver had more bass, but then was also recessed in the upper mids, where it was the opposite with the right side. Now, if you do use the beeps and go through the custom presets, if you use my website, I have a link in the description below to expand and look at other measurements. This is what the FPS preset looks like, which basically just reduces bass. It does help a lot in FPS gaming if you don't want to do custom EQ. The movie preset to me is not really worth using because, as you can tell, that is just gobs of bass. It's far too much. And then if you go to the bass boost, well, you can see where this is going. We have a bass boost, but then recessed mids and treble even further, which makes it sound very bass heavy and dark. Now, when you compare it to the Virtuoso RGB XT that this replaced, the sound quality may look similar to a certain area, but there is a pretty big difference in sound quality. The graphene drivers and transmitter cleanliness and all this other stuff factored in, everything does end up making the new Virtuoso Max sound significantly better on ear. The bass is much better, and it does sound clean. You might think that, you know, because this peak here is smoother, or the upper mids are smoother, that does help with mid-range performance, but it still didn't sound as detailed or clear, or clean, I should say, as the new Virtuoso Max. Then the big thing with the older one is the bass delivery was almost non-existent because you can never really get a seal. So I think for most people, you will like the Max more. There's going to be a theme emerging throughout this review, and one of that is that I feel like certain things are just not really acceptable by today's standards at flagship pricing. So I'm going to be a little bit harsher on the Virtuoso Max than I normally would be, only because I've been getting kind of frustrated with a lot of new headsets lately launching with issues. The Alienware Pro, which sounded great once you did some EQ, has issues where if the noise cancellation is on, it greatly impacts the sound depending on your volume. And then we had issues with Turtle Beach with countless firmware bugs on the Stealth 600s with driver mismatch, the Atlas Air having all these firmware issues and artifacts if you did any EQ. So yeah, I'm frustrated. The sound quality could have been so much better from a stock tuning perspective, and ironically, when you use it as a Bluetooth headset, it actually sounds better because that bass bloat isn't there as much and the mid-range suck out isn't as strong. You can't save custom EQ to this headset, so if you are using this on PlayStation and you want to benefit from a custom profile, which I'm about to talk about, unfortunately that only applies to PC users. The other downside is this is a $330 headset that has no game to chat mix on PC, which a lot of other flagship headsets do offer. And if that's important to you and you're not using a virtual audio mixer like SteelSeries Sonar, well, that's another thing I wish it had. Now, if you don't want to deal with custom EQ through IQ, Dolby Atmos, or my own parametric EQ that I will soon share, you can use a feature in IQ called SoundID. And hilariously, usually I've had issues with that where it's not like quite perfect. They've been improving it. And the difference that you get in sound quality by taking your time and going through it is astonishing. It totally transforms the headset sound profile in a positive way. So if you don't want to mess with custom EQ, do this process. It basically walks you through an audio test where you hear a series of tones, and that allows you to kind of fine tune the sound. Now, the other issue I've had with this headset is the volume inconsistency is just terrible. I don't know what it is, but if it goes to sleep and you turn it back on, 100% volume sounds like what 30% volume did the last time I used it. And there are many cases where you can't like actually listen to it at a loud enough volume for gaming. It's far too quiet, and you have to go through a series of unplugging the dongle, power cycling it, and all these things. So I had massive issues with volume. This has to be addressed with firmware. Right now, if you're okay with tinkering with things literally daily to get it to go loud enough, then yeah, there's potential here. You could just not install IQ and see if that fixes your problem. I stopped IQ entirely and did disable it, but some of the problems came back, so it was kind of inconsistent. I haven't been able to validate the exact process to make the audio cut out. Now, if you don't want to go through all that, or you don't like the results that you're getting from SoundID, I spent countless hours on this, like far too many, customizing the sound using parametric EQ through PEACE with equalizer APO. I will have links in the description below and to take you to that so you can auto import it to save time, as well as settings on the screen. Now, I made two profiles. One is a more immersive profile that kind of keeps that bass that I like about the Virtuoso Max. So if you like the warmer sound, you're playing an immersive game, a single player game, or just casual games with your friends, the immersive EQ that I made I think sounds fantastic for that. Then if you want to take things on the competitive side, switch over to my other EQ, which is neutral, and that's going to do better for acoustics, vocal heavy tracks, and more competitive play. Now, most of what I'm going to talk about assumes that you did some form of EQ or audio fixing, but I do want to include some discussion on the bass sound profile out of the box, which frankly, again, at $330 to me is borderline unacceptable. I'm being harsh because there's been a lot of good headsets and products coming out lately that I'll talk about that are doing better for the same or less money in terms of out-of-the-box tuning, which, yes, I know is a personal preference. You might want very recessed mids and just gobs of bass with a sharp treble spike. You might like that. Totally fine. But in the grand scheme of things, when you compare it to other products, it just needs some work. I found that certain mid-range and vocals were lacking in detail. They sound too recessed, and the stuff that does come through sounds overly thick and sibilant at the same time. So that harsh S that I occasionally have is accentuated by that 6 kilohertz peak, or emphasized by that 6K peak. So I'm not a big fan of the stock tuning. Now, this headset kind of represents the whole statement of it's got good bones but needs some work. The graphene drivers are excellent. There is exceptional power handling with the Virtuoso Max, more so than most headsets I've covered. It gets extremely loud when the volume works, and even when it gets that loud, there's almost zero distortion. So if you like to play with EQ and you want strong bass with it, this is one of the best headsets you can get for delivering that once you play with all the EQ. The other nice thing about the Virtuoso Max is it has very little amp gain noise. So some headsets, when you turn them up, you hear a little bit of a hiss, especially when side tone is on. Not going to be the case here. But when you compare it to something like the Razer BlackShark V2 Pro or the Logitech G Pro X2 or Astros, these can get very loud without having any kind of a faint hiss in the background. So the noise floor is exceptionally low. It's very clean. And I find that the transmitter upgrade they did helps preserve some of the subtle details better. If you're willing to deal with all of these bugs and issues I'm talking about and fix the volume and all this other stuff, once EQ'd, this is an excellent sounding headset. It has the potential. That's why I put all that work into the EQ. So if you're willing to deal with that, I think the end result is great. Purely from a sound quality perspective. Now, focusing in more on competitive play, if that's super important for you, once it's EQ'd, I think it's a great headset for FPS gaming. The noise isolation is decent, even though it's still breathable, but that helps kind of reduce the whole background noise effect so you can focus in on the footsteps. And again, because the transmitter is preserving a lot of those details, with proper tuning and EQ, I find myself just as competitive as some of my more expensive products that I use when I typically play FPS games. I don't think it dethrones the Turtle Beach Stealth Pro purely on FPS, but there are some other benefits that this has that the Stealth Pro doesn't, so it's all a matter of context. Overall, I think the biggest issue for immersive or casual gaming, if you're doing extending listening sessions, you can make this sound absolutely incredible for that. Sound quality will not be an issue. It becomes more of an issue of comfort, going back to the ear pads being as shallow as they are. So endurance gaming, comfort gaming, yes, it's going to sound great for that, but is this the right chassis and overall feel? That's up to you. So I want to quickly compare the Virtuoso Max to several other models. So let's start with the G Pro X2 from Logitech, which retails for $250 but often goes on sale for $230. So at basically $100 less, what do you get? Well, you still get graphene drivers, and to me this is a more comfortable headset to wear. It also has onboard EQ now thanks to a firmware update, so if it's important to get that bass extension and you're playing on PlayStation, to me, that's a better option. Now, this has a lower quality microphone. It lacks simultaneous Bluetooth. It does not have active noise cancellation, but it is built extremely well. It comes with two different ear pads, both a sport fabric and a leatherette. So if you're not using any of those features, it doesn't even have game to chat mix either. But again, that's irrelevant on PlayStation. So if you're okay with sacrificing a bit on the mic quality and you're playing on PS5, to me, I think this is still a little bit better of a value. Then you have the Asus ROG Delta II, which is kind of a surprise hit for me. It has Armory Crate, which is not the best software from a resource perspective, but it does allow you to save EQ, and it does have a compressor built in. So on the PC side, yes, you lose active noise cancellation, but the microphone is still great. It's extremely comfortable to wear, but admittedly it's better suited towards larger heads. If your head's on the smaller side, then there's a really good chance this guy is going to be loose. But again, the value is excellent here. I think the mic is comparable, the comfort's phenomenal, and it's still worthy to consider. Again, it just really comes down to what's important to you. From a sound quality perspective, the ROG Delta II is better tuned for FPS gaming and competitive play out of the box. It sounds cleaner and it sounds more natural for music as well. So it doesn't really require EQ, though it does benefit from a little bit of EQ. Once you fully commit to EQ and you really dial it in, I think the potential is better with the Virtuoso Max because of that much better power handling. It also handles very complex scenes extremely well. That's one advantage of the Virtuoso Max that many others don't. But purely for competitive play and FPS gaming, there's no real advantage to this here. I still think the ROG Delta II is a worthy option. Now, of course, I have to talk about the Odyssey Maxwell, which is not the most competitive headset for FPS, but it's still good. The detail is there. It's just a little bit harder to localize things. It's also a much heavier headset, and there have been some reports of people having issues with their Maxwells not holding up as well. This is my original Maxwell. I bought this one 2 years ago. I still have two other Maxwells that I haven't really used much because I've been seeing the comments and I've just been trying to use mine. Mine still works fine. I did pad swap it and I did switch out the strap. But from a music perspective, if you're listening to music, there's really nothing better than the Maxwell for music at $300 or less, especially considering it's a wireless. And I actually like this better than a lot of wired audiophile headphones at this price range as well. So the sound quality is fantastic. It's let down a little bit by the microphone quality. The controls feel cheaper, as does the build quality, and it is less comfortable. but you're basically getting the best sound you can get for the money with some other things sacrificed. And then you have the Razer BlackShark V2 Pro 2023 edition, which is just crazy comfortable. The microphone is the best microphone per dollar, I think, of any headset ever made. And it's still pretty good for FPS gaming as well, for especially if you're a PlayStation player, because you have a lot of EQ profiles you can toggle through. The only thing this struggle with for me is when you have really complex scenes, if there's a lot of action and explosions happening, if you're playing an FPS game, for example, the sound starts to fall apart a little bit. It does not have the same clarity and capability as the Asus ROG, even the Logitech G Pro X2 or the Corsair Virtuoso Max. So again, if everything's perfect on the EQ side of things, this kind of lacks a little bit when it comes to outright detail for complex scenes. Aside from that, it's an excellent value. It does have Bluetooth, but it's not simultaneous. Again, no ANC, but it's comfortable with a great mic, so I think it's still worthy if you're looking to save some money. Then you have the Alienware Pro wireless headset. I love the looks of this headset. It's like the best looking travel headset I've come across. So if you remove the mic and you want to use this on a plane, it's super subtle. The ANC performance has a lot of issues right now with affecting sound quality. But I think this thing sounds fantastic for music. It's very clear. It's extremely comfortable, and the only pads it comes with are leatherette pads, so it locks in the sound quite a bit, but if you're sensitive to hot climates, it might trap a little bit of that in. The microphone on this is pretty terrible. It's probably one of the worst mics of anything here, maybe compared to the Maxwell, purely on sound quality. So do I think it's worth the money? You know, if you compare it to ones like the G Pro X2, which is in the same price range, you just go kind of back and forth on what's better or worse. I can wear this for hours. I don't really care if my friends think my mic sounds great or not. They still know what I'm saying. And with EQ, I still like this headset. So I'm not saying you have to like this one too. The mic is pretty bad, and some people have issues with the lack of things like a dedicated game to chat mix as well, and no simultaneous Bluetooth, which is a bummer, but purely on sound quality, it also has graphene drivers, so it's a good value at $230. Now, I know what you're thinking. If only there was a headset that had active noise cancellation, simultaneous Bluetooth, onboard EQ, was comfortable, worked pretty well, and was good for FPS gaming. Well, thankfully, there are, and these are the Nova Pro Wireless and the Turtle Beast Stealth Pro, which have almost the exact same price as the Virtuoso Max. So, pros and cons of both. Now, as I mentioned, these have a lot of the features everyone wants. They have game to chat mix on PC and Xbox. These work on all three platforms with a single SKU, so you don't have to buy more than one headset. There's onboard EQ. They both have hot swappable batteries. So yes, the battery life is pretty terrible compared to the Max, which gets significantly more, but you can always just swap them out, and if your batteries wear out over time, you can switch to it. So where do they lack? Well, on the Nova Pro Wireless, the microphone is not as good as the Virtuoso Max. It also, purely from a music sound quality perspective, again, only if you do EQ, these don't sound as good as the Virtuoso Max. Where this has an advantage, especially if you pad swap, is it's extremely comfortable and the controls are excellent as well. I find that I prefer stuff like this for competitive play because I need to have game to chat mix to be competitive. Sometimes if I'm in a sweaty situation, I need to turn my friends down very quickly, and I can't undersell or overemphasize the importance of controls enough. I think this is a wonderful option. It's just very much outgunned in terms of like raw build quality, and once tuned perfectly, the Virtuoso Max just has a lot more bass or quality bass, and it sounds fuller and more powerful. Then you have the Stealth Pro, which is the reigning champ for FPS gaming on a wireless headset. Also onboard EQ, active noise cancellation, simultaneous Bluetooth. It has everything. The microphone is okay. Neither of these are like class-leading mics, but they're certainly passable. My biggest issue with the Stealth Pro is the controls. While capable, having game to chat mix, the ability to do so is a pain. You have to press and hold the button for 3 seconds just to adjust it. And these buttons are so hard to press that you press the cups into your ear and you hear like a crinkle sound from the driver, because this is not graphene and neither is this. Then you have the Astro A50X, which, as you heard in the mic test, is fantastic. This has onboard EQ, parametric EQ, which does work on PlayStation and Xbox, so you can use this one SKU for all three platforms, again, saving you money. This is the $380 version, but there's also a $300 version now called the Gen 5. This is the A50X. The Gen 5 just simply drops the HDMI switch on the back and switches to all USB. losing you game to chat mix on PS5, but that's about it. Otherwise, they're essentially the exact same headset. Now, the tonality of the A50X is incredible. It's one of the best tuned headsets out of the box compared only to things like the Stealth Pro or the Maxwell, especially after very mild EQ. The issue I have with the A50X is if you're doing competitive play, there's like zero noise isolation thanks to these very tiny but breathable cloth ear pads. So if you have a noisy PC fan, that's going to be an issue because you're never going to be able to tune that out, whereas all of the others I talked about do a better job at rejecting that noise. The other thing is even though this has a graphene driver and it sounds excellent for music, the wireless protocol that they use to send audio signals to the headset seems to drop subtle details just a little bit more than some other headsets, which does not pair well with a headset that does not have strong sound isolation. Again, for competitive play, you're hearing the subtle nuances of music and games. I feel that it gets rid of just that subtlety and it's not as competitive as a result. However, for conference calls, casual gaming, and you can still play FPS games, it's still a wonderful headset. I've been using this a ton because I work during the day and I needed something reliable and convenient. I love the controls. It's definitely the best implemented in terms of quick adjustments and ease of use. I love the flip to mute mic. So it's just a matter. I think this is a better headset for the money right now, as long as the competitive play and noise isolation or ANC aren't issues to you, then I would take the Astro over the Virtuoso Max. Overall, I just can't recommend it right now. It's pretty disappointing because I thought this was going to be one I would easily use every single day. And frankly, I can't because the volume is the biggest issue for me. And once I sort that out and make it work, the next biggest issue is long-term comfort because that pressure does build up after a while. If I can tolerate both of those, then yes, the sound quality is great, only if you spend all this time EQing or use my EQs. So I don't want to give them too many passes here because I think there's a lot of stuff that should have been dealt with first prior to release that frankly wasn't. And it's a little disappointing. I really hope some of this gets better or they listen to feedback and make improvements and take that for what you will. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to see you at the next video. If you do decide to purchase this, I'll have generic links in the description below. I have no kickbacks with Corsair, obviously, because I'm not really recommending it right now. But thank you for making it to the end. I appreciate the support, and I will see you at the next one. Bye.